Good morning. We call this meeting to order. Let's have our roll call, please. Thank you. We did not adjourn yesterday, and we recessed, so we'll go right back into our agenda that we had. Sheriff Elks, I believe you're first. Mr. Manager, do you preface that with anything?
Yes, sir. It's ready. Get straight into it.
All right. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Dave.
I know we gonna continue with the agenda, but is it all right if we have some prayer before we do that?
Well, we had that yesterday, and it was not adjourned, and we just made the decision to go ahead with the way it is, Dave.
But this is a new day that the Lord has given to us.
Why don't you pray then for us?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for the blessings thereof. Bless us at this hour universally, collectively, and individually as we go about the business of the citizens of Pitt County. In Jesus' precious name, I ask it all. Amen.
Amen. Okay, Sheriff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to come. I know it's a busy time for everybody, but this gives us a chance to get up and present our budgets. The manager and I have met. His recommendations and my requests are a little bit far apart, so we're going to try to talk to you about those today. For the most part, we're in pretty good shape. Just a couple of my personnel issues I'm very concerned about. We'll run through our procedure here. Our main job is to protect life and property, respond to every citizen's call for help, treat citizens with dignity and fairness, conduct a thorough investigation, and bring justice to for our victims. We hold state and federal prisoners. We also maintain security in our courthouses. agency workload performance. We responded to over 11,400 calls for service from our citizens last year. We ensured the safety of business checks. We did over 59,000 business checks. Reported over 6,600 reports of criminal activity. It's a 5% increase, although our criminal acts are down 9% from 2012. And what that really means is that we've had that many calls for service. Now, a lot of times we get there and we determine the calls are unfounded, more of a call for service than it is a criminal act. We processed over 24,200 civil papers. And remind you, the civil process fee we collect on that, that's $30 per paper. We received over 2,900 applications for gun permits. Our part of that is $40 per gun permit. We continue a significant increase in applications for concealed carry. We're really expecting a decrease this year. We look at our 2013 numbers. We're up by 150% since 2011. And that's 2,533. Like I said, our part of that application fee is $40. Citizens Academy. One of the programs we run, and our purpose of that is to educate the citizens of some of the things we do throughout the department. We developed a lot of friendships through that. We developed a lot of volunteers through our Citizens Academy. It helps our community understand what all we do. We probably have picked up actively, well, we have over 150 volunteers, but just out of those groups alone, we have people that come into our fingerprints for us daily, free of charge, do our Citizens on Patrol. They come in and do other errands we need. They fill in where we are not able to provide the manpower to do that. We've had increased interest from our citizens on volunteers. We do our community watch. We have very limited staff to oversee that. Budget request highlights for year 14-15. Okay, well, we got it broke down. You can see the county manager's recommendations, year-to-date expense, additional funds requested. Our additional funds we request is $190,920. We requested one person per shift, patrol officer, as often appears. I'm sorry, I got a light shining. I can't see the top line. It says telecommunications position. Okay, I remind you, we met first of the year about the cost share program that we had for our telecommunicators. I suggested, and I think the county commissioners agreed, that we wouldn't charge our small municipalities the service of dispatching. So I was told by the County Commissioner Board to put that in my budget. We're requesting one dispatcher per shift. In addition to handle the offset the workload from the small departments we have to dispatch for. Oftentimes in communications, we only have one dispatcher in there. Employee can't even get up and go to the bathroom without a phone call ringing. It's not even safe for that person to be in the room. If they would have a heart attack or pass out or faint or something, they wouldn't even be able to get any assistance. Although that is the main lifeline for the sheriff's office. If somebody was to call for assistance from a deputy or a phone, that person would not be able to even meet that need. Our turnover rate is high due to the nature of our calls, the job staffing. They're totally overtasked. These guys carry a large amount of banked overtime, comp time, and vacation. They're not even allowed to comply within the guidelines of the county guidelines of how much comp time we can carry, how much holiday time we can carry. We have to keep one of them on call just for the reason of calling people back when we're overworked, so we have to pay somebody to be on call for that. It's just totally overtasked in there, and I ask you to strongly consider that. We've talked about it before, and I was given the impression that we would be able to get those positions if I asked for them. Our overtime. County manager recommends $100,000. Year to date, we've already spent $160,132. We will request an additional $50,000 in funds for our overtime. Responding to calls, the citizens' requests are unpredictable. My rule of thumb is if we call a person out on weekends, we're going to pay them for the overtime. We don't have time to bank them off the following week. Generally, if they get called out on a major crime, I don't need them taking off Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to compensate for their time of a homicide or major crime that occurred over the weekend. They need to be still working Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to solve that case. So oftentimes we'll task and ask for mutual aid from our small towns, such as Farmville. Just recently had a Dogwood Festival. We do what we call a mutual aid agreement. They call us and say, I need 9 officers, I need 6 officers. What are you willing to provide? So oftentimes we provide officers over there their request to meet their needs. So that's another item, a line item that we have to pay overtime. We use our overtime for that. Grifton, Shad Festival, Bethel Harvest Festival, constantly having to help small municipalities meet their needs. And I think it's right that the sheriff's office does that. Anytime we have our overtime, we have the 86-hour rule, and touch on that quickly, is the state law allows, the federal law allows officers to work 86 hours at regular time before they go into time and a half. They still get paid the straight time for the first 6 hours, but after that, it's time and a half. So every hour they work over is not time and a half like a lot of people think. Law enforcement and firefighters are exempt from that law. Ammunition. Constantly, since I've been sheriff, I've seen the increase of ammo jump as much as $40,000 to $45,000 a year. We still are experiencing the hardship of being able to obtain ammunition. We order our ammo a year out. We just got last year's ammo about a month ago. We've already ordered next year's ammo. Due to the wars going on and everybody buying up ammo, it's been very difficult to get ammo. But however, when we are blessed, we do get it at a state contract price. Now, to give you some idea, we pay $25 a box on state contract versus the market would be $50, $55 if you go to the Walmart store and buy it. The problem is when they ship it from the manufacturers, are they going to ship it to the law enforcement, or are they going to ship it to Walmart at $50 a box, or are they going to send it to us at $25 a box? That's why we have to order so much ahead. So whenever they get an extra crate of ammo, they'll send it to the law enforcement. But we have to beg, borrow to get ammo. That's why we have to order so far out in advance. But that's a great concern. We're carrying rifles now. That's additional expense there. Officers have to qualify annually. We allot 300 rounds of handgun per person, and a couple of hundred rounds of ammo for the rifles. Some officers still carry shotguns. I prefer to carry a shotgun, rifle, and a handgun because there's different choices you may need to make in different situations. That's what I prefer, and that's what I carry personally. Building rent. This is going to be a new issue here we need to talk about. We recently formed a formed a new unit, a narcotics unit. We've joined partners with the Pitt Regional Task Force. Up till now, the Greenville Police Department's been funding the bill. We find it very difficult to do drug investigations when we were working out there in the county, and then we encounter that the Greenville Police Department or the Greenville Task Force is working the same case. I've already invested $10,000 in undercover buy money. Then we get ready to make the arrest, we find out that the Greenville Police Department's done the same thing. So somebody just lost $10,000. There's another safety issue there. Are we pulling up to make an arrest and we got undercover officers on the scene we don't have any knowledge of? So after sitting down and looking at the benefits from that, we realized that we can combine our forces together, we're combining our manpower together, and it's a great resource for generating asset forfeitures money. If you've been noticing in the paper a lot of heroin arrests have been made in the last 3 months since we've joined forces together. A lot of marijuana, all these big drug arrests you see are coming where we've combined about 12 officers to work together. We have Greenville Police Department has 6, Sheriff has 6, Winnable has 1, Farmville has 1, East Carolina's getting ready to put 1 on there. So we have a great resource. The SBI has 1. So before we've had 1 on the task force. I felt like I was outnumbered. I felt like I won't be in balance right. This is the way we can get equal distribution. But to go along with that, I have to carry my weight. In other words, I either pay half of their $6,000 a month rent to get into their building and be able to be an equal distributor. So the way I was able to negotiate with Mr. Don Parrott oversees that building through our Imperial Tobacco Company trust fund. So Mr. Parrott approached me prior to this, about a year ago, wondering if I needed some more space. And I was not interested in it at the time. But now he's agreed to give me the space that we need to combine the 2 units together at a very, very ridiculously low price. He's going to rent me the space that we need for $1,000 a month, and that's going to include the utilities. We all know the utility bill will probably be equal to that, probably. So we're getting the space at a very good place. We're able to carry our weight. If not, Greenville Police Department would rent this space at a different price, and then they would want to divide the bill with me. So right now, we are able to obtain this space for $1,000 a month. It's going to put us moving out of the building over here, Pat's building. We're going to move our narcotics unit to the task force. I think it's a good decision. We were willing to pay part of that money per month out of drug seizure. I think we're asking the county for $800 a month on that. So I would like to, I don't know if you want to ask any questions about that now while we're on that subject. That's something that, it's a new item that we need to discuss. If not, I'll keep moving forward. Okay?
Go ahead then, Sheriff, we'll come back.
Thank you, sir. Looking at the next item I'm going to talk to you about is our cashier's position. Recently, we've had some concerns. We had to call upon the SBI to come in and investigate some misappropriation of some funds. We deal with between $800,000 to $1.2 million a year in cash, checks, and payments through our list of revenues. I have a large list. I guess you can take time to look at those, but it's probably 20 or 30 items every day we take money in on. We get money mailed to us. We get money dropped off. We get money sent from the clerk's office. A lot of times it's cash stapled to a paper, and these papers are sitting there waiting to go through. It's really no accountability. So we've changed the way we're doing things, but it's also by changing the way we're doing things, it's made me not be able to do other things that we need to do when it comes to clerical work. I think it would be beneficial to us as well as the county receiving $1 million a year, that we have somebody there with some accountant abilities, qualifications, and look at their job description being paid accordingly to that. Foresee, if this is passed, setting up a cashier's office in a small space we have up there. They will handle all money coming in. It's just been always allowed in the past, and I think it's something that we don't need to allow anymore. Money sitting around, and accountability. You deal with that kind of money in today's world, you need accountability. I want one person that's accountable for that. I want a checking system at the end of the day, a till in place that's signed by a supervisor that's can count for that. And we made changes already, but like I said, it's tasked other areas that we can't focus on it the way I want to focus. I want that to be that person's job. Just like at the clerk's office, you got a cashier sitting there taking money. That is their responsibility. If something gets missing, I don't have to investigate 10 people and find out where the money's missing at. It's all about accountability. It's all about tracking this money and making sure that the citizens of Pitt County, we get the money we need through our revenue balance. And this next slide actually shows the revenues that we take in. You can take just a second to look at those if you like. You know, we do a lot of child support, gun permit fees, civil process. We take money in on foreclosures. Budget request highlights for the detention center. Overtime. Same problem we have there. We have manager's recommendation, 100,000, year-to-date expense, 109. We're asking an additional 35,000. And this is one thing we have no discretion on. These officers are required to come in 30 minutes early every day. So they have to be paid 30 minutes overtime every day. With the amount of employees we have, that's what it works out to be. Uniforms for officers. County manager is recommending $250 annually for each officer in detention center. We're requesting $450 per officer. And the cost to outfit an officer with 3 sets of clothes, 1 pair of shoes annually is $450, which is a minimum consideration for the number of hours they work. And I'm really surprised they don't have to have at least 2 to 3 pair of shoes a year out there. When I go out there and walk, I mean, you walk a lot every day. If you're on an exercise program, that's a good place to go work because you would definitely get your miles in per day walking the floors out there. Uniforms for inmates. Since being sheriff, and I've noticed that we've cut back. Last year was a real big hit on that. We haven't set aside and allowed any money for our uniforms, with jumpsuits for our inmates. That's been cut for the last 2 budgets. From $40,000 to $17,000. We in bad shape right now. We got guys going in the courtroom, and you can basically see through their uniforms, their jumpsuits. They've been knitted, they've been stitched back up, they've been repaired as much as they can. They have just wore slam out. We've got to set some money aside to replace those. We're requesting an additional $30,000 for that. To give you a little example, this is what some of our uniforms look like. On the left, you see a shoulder there that's got a torn patch. You can see the cuffs on the hair on the right. When you carry them to the courtroom, it almost, it's a disgrace that we run a detention center that we can't even provide decent uniforms for them to wear, at least when they come to court. The judges have made several comments about it. This is another case of us just doing more with less. I think the guys bought a sewing machine 2 years ago, and they did everything they could to make this last, but we're to the point now we've got to fund that. Our building maintenance fund for the detention center, A and B block showers have been operating since 1993. The 9 showers have been repaired for the last 3 years and are in need of overhaul, refurbish. The estimated cost is approximately $5,000 per shower. The Pitt County Health Inspector and the jail inspector both agree refurbishing is needed. We were requesting $190,000. The manager's requested $170,000 in that. We're going to need an additional $20,000 to meet that need. This gives you some idea of what some of our showers look like at detention center. It's another case of us just doing more with less. I think this is a year that we're going to have to do something about it. If you notice tiles missing off there, the floor's got tile missing. And this is a shower that's used every day. Our training, to offset the Prison Rape Elimination Act, where officers are required to attend this. The current budget reflects $60 per officer in training. We can't even hardly attend a seminar in Greenville for that price. We're requesting an additional $20,000 other than what the manager is recommending. A year-to-date expense is $9,400. Jail health services. We're all familiar with that. Recommendations, $1,790,763. We're requesting an additional $18,000 for that. That works out to $415 per inmate daily, with over 500 inmates. Revenue decrease. This is something that we were not expecting. Our federal inmate count has decreased, not only us, but across the state. The feds have backed off from adopting so many federal cases. I think the population across North Carolina has dropped from 600 to maybe 300 or less today. And we have more than our fair share of those. I think we probably, how many we have today? About 45. Last week we were down to 32, but we're really trying to get them back up. We've estimated that we can do about 60, and maybe after the first of the next budget year, we're hoping we can get 60 a day in there. And we'll take more if we can get them. But that's been a decrease of revenues. So I'm hoping I'm not being punished because of that, but that's just something we've gotten very comfortable having. We've enjoyed that money for a long time. Although we are still actively, I give you my word on that, seeking opportunities to get the federal inmates. But they're not there, they're not there. They've backed off adopting a lot of cases. I think the federal government realized the amount of money they're spending on feds, and they're pushing them back to the state level for us to prosecute them and house them and what forth. If you noticed, we haven't talked about the opening of the new jail. I'm hoping with the county getting back on their feet, we can benefit from the $850,000 we're not asking for the jail. I think we're close. I don't know what word to use. Maybe trusting that we won't fill our jail back up in a couple of months. Right now, our count is down. That's subject to change any minute. Some of that count is down due to the decrease of federal inmates, but our overall count is down. But you have no way of predicting that. The only thing I ask is reserve the right to be able to come back if we see things change. But we're not pushing that. We're hoping that the county can enjoy some of that relief of that, what we were expecting to have to do this year, the $850,000, and maybe catch up on some other things that we are behind on. I feel pretty comfortable, and I think we're willing to take a chance on not opening the new jail up right now. The numbers are not there right now. If we can get another 6 months under our belt, I think we'd be in good shape. But have some concerns. I hear that the social services are looking to cut out the deputy at the health department and social services out there. I strongly would discourage that. That is going to be very dangerous to our employees as well as the citizens out there. These people out there are very disgruntled at times. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're very upset. They take it out on the caseworkers. They take it out on whoever's there. A lot of domestics occur out there. That's fully funded by the Department of Social Services. And my opinion is they're making a bad mistake by doing away with that position. They're going to have to call 911 if they need a deputy. And we got a lot of county employees out there. And I think it comes a point in time we need to protect our employees as well as our citizens. And with that being said, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Sheriff. Does the commissioners got any questions for the sheriff?
I have a few questions, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. James.
All right, I'm not talking about going outside of Pitt County, one of the complaints I've had, but funerals and so forth, we expect the sheriff to participate in anybody as far as Pitt County is concerned.
Yes, sir.
But all these funerals that our personnel are going to, and there are many of them, I see them on television, are these people, do we pay them when they go to all these counties and the process and the equipment and so forth? Are they
Well,
being paid, or are they going on their own free time?
Some of them on their own free time. Some of them, myself, I'm basically on duty when I go. I go to the Wayne County Sheriff that died. I went to his funeral. The one in New Bern, I think some officers went on their day off for that. We didn't pay officers to go to that.
What I'm getting at, it's not just one, you see many of them. I mean, it's on
They have to
television.
volunteer to go to that. Now,
Yeah, but that's what, And I've asked, they've asked me, but Mr. James, they're talking about they always want more. Are these people there on being paid to go to all these places? And if they are, why are they there if we need so much more personnel?
Well, I would like to think if an officer gets killed in the line of duty, that the citizens of Pitt County would expect a law enforcement officer to represent us, that we're concerned enough that they've given their life in the line of duty to at least send one officer there to represent us, somebody within a 50-mile radius of Pitt County. We don't send them out of state. I don't know how far, the farthest I've ever seen anybody is to New Bern.
Well, I was that way in World War II, but we didn't have no paying all this money for it.
I'm not paying them.
So it's no difference in it.
I
as
do
far as
allow them to
giving
drive
a
their
life.
county car, and we do
Yes,
pay their
sir.
gas.
But I think, personally myself, I'd like to know how much time is and how much is being paid by the taxpayers here in Pitt County.
Yes, sir.
Certainly, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, on the one at the, out there where we're having so much problems with social service.
Social
But
service.
yes, that is a very important key position there. And those ladies, and they're mostly ladies, and we do have some church personnel on the second floor, but they're never there during the daytime. And so therefore, it would be very difficult for us. And when they need help, they need it then. They don't need it 5 minutes later. They need somebody there on ground to take and to do that particular, solve that problem that they have for that. The next thing on communication, as you get more communication call, do we get a decrease in our calls downstairs, Mr. Manager? Or is it, how does that work? If he's getting so many more calls, then are we getting the calls here? So therefore, can we transfer somebody here to his department?
No, sir. This building here where the communication center is what we call our central PSAP. That's where all the calls come in initially, then they're dispatched, whether the sheriff, whether Greenville, whether fire, EMS. But we handle the county's 911 center handles the call at the front end. If it does need to go to the sheriff's communication center, then it's transferred over.
So everything comes through here, and then it goes back to the other places, whether it's Bedford, Grifton, or the sheriff, or wherever.
Well, it's
it
either
might be.
handled appropriately downstairs in 911, or in cases where it needs to be referred to the sheriff for the sheriff's communication center to take care of it, or Greenville's communication center. And we do handle the communications responsibilities for, well, I guess the sheriff does for some of the municipalities on the police side. But we're handling the fire and rescue EMS downstairs.
And I guess one of the things that I really am concerned about is the federal prisoners. Our goal was not 60, but was up there to 80. We have room for 100. That was our goal when we built the block that we have there, that we borrowed them. We didn't borrow the money. The federal government gave us the money to take in to build that building for federal prisoners.
Yes,
But
sir.
now we're down to 30, what? Did you say 30?
How many? 45 today.
Well, you got 45 now, but you got down as low as 30-something.
Oh, yes, sir, we did.
And that is, of course, is,
Mr. James, the original 100 cell block unit was built probably well over 20 years ago. We did
I know.
commit to holding 100 federal inmates for a 20-year period, and I believe that 20 period has ran its course.
oh, yes.
Now, we have negotiated a new contract with the feds at, I think, $78 per day.
That's right.
And in this year's budget, I believe we have 70, is it 70, Dwayne?
70, yes, sir.
70 inmates. Now, Dwayne and I had took it down to 65, and based upon the yearly average and what we've done, we've got 65 inmates at $78 a day plugged in there. And now the sheriff is saying he would like to take it down to 60, but that's, as you reflected in there, that's a large revenue hit on the general fund budget of $285,000 that's not accounted for.
Right, and I know that. That's one reason I'm bringing this out.
That'd be additional cuts that would need to be made within the overall budget.
But that's no fault of ours. I promise you, my major works this thing every day. He's on the phone negotiating and picking up prisoners. We get 1 or 2 a day extra. And they like our detention center. They like our facilities. They like what we offer. They like our medical. They want us to be in I hate to say it on TV, but we're probably the highest federal inmate housing in eastern North Carolina.
And I guess where I'm going to deal on this is, if we don't have the federal prisoners there, then we got room for local prisoners that we can keep there, so we won't have to worry about opening that block cell.
Exactly. That's a lot of thought been put into that. And we're keeping our fingers crossed, but Like I said, well, I don't really know what word to use. We just hope it don't happen.
All right, I do know that we do get personnel, prisoners from other counties, or we were at one time. Beaufort County is an example. Are we getting prisoners to come from other counties now, or are they taking care of their own?
They're taking care of their own. We have no request for that.
None there. There was one more thing I had wrote down here. Well, that's enough.
Thank you, Mr. James. One thing I want to say, though, on this telecommunicators positions, how many do you have of those, Sheriff?
How many I have now? 8? 8.
All right.
And 1 supervisor. There's no relief building there.
I'm sure the manager evaluated that when he made his recommendation here, but as I recall, when you came up here about the municipalities surrounding, we did, or I did, I don't know how many commissioners
did too. There was
agreed
2 of them.
for you to bring that back in your budget. And I'd like to request the manager review that again for us as we go on in our process.
So move.
No, not yet,
No,
Dave.
we're not doing, that's for Grifton and.
Just to echo on that, I went back and talked to the small towns, and they were so relieved that they weren't gonna be tasked
Right.
with that.
Well, we
They
told
can't
you
afford
that,
it.
you're
They can't
absolutely
afford it.
right.
Yeah.
Next thing about ammunition, I can't fathom you not having enough ammunition to practice and to do your job with. Is that what you're telling the sheriff?
According to the amount of money he's gonna give me, that's gonna be the problem. But right now, we're okay, but next year's budget's gonna be that way. And we take this very serious. I mean, I've had officers have lost their certification. I've had 2 officers I've had to move from law enforcement to other jobs because they can't meet their needs. We require them to to test with a minimum of 80 to qualify. And, so we make them have to practice, and we want efficient officers.
Also, in addition to the other, I'd like for the manager to review that, and of course, you indicate, you want to say something, or you just want to wait till I review, Scott?
Yeah, if I could just interject with one thought. In looking at the sheriff's overall budget, as well as all the departments, when we created this baseline level budget, what I'm looking at, he's only showing you half the picture here in terms of saying what I recommended, what he's requesting, what he's done year to date. We went back and looked at what did he or what did the department do through June 30th of the full fiscal year prior as kind of that baseline. Now, he's showing you what he's done so far year to date. In a lot of these cases, he's above and beyond budget. We can't have a baseline budget if we're going to spend beyond where we're at in the current year. He may be justifying that that's what his needs are, but again, if we're going to have a baseline budget and hold the tax rate as is, I mean, if all the departments were able to argue this way, we'd need to raise taxes 4 or 5 cents easily.
I think you're appropriate in your review of that, but what I'd like for you and the sheriff to communicate on that, and then you bring it back to us, Scott, on those 2 points.
There's one more thing that I want to bring out.
Wait, Mr. James, we'll come back to you. Now we've got Glenn, and then Beth, and then you, Mr. James, and then Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, you know, when we looked at, for animal control, you're talking about getting rid of this discount, which will give us $415,000 to build the expansion. Could we get rid of the other 1% and help fund some of these costs?
Well, I wouldn't recommend you get rid of the entire 2%. I'd recommend at a bare minimum, keep it at 0.25, 1/4%. Because like I was saying yesterday, you will still have all of the financial institutions through the escrow accounts will pay early in August. So we'll have that early infusion of money. So I wouldn't take it all the way down, but you could get rid of 1 3/4 of it, technically. Now, but let me say, April 30th, we as a county, you as a Board of Commissioners would have to pass a resolution by April 30th to have it effective July 1. So we've already passed that date for this year. If you take action now, it can only be effective for July 1 of the following fiscal year of 15-16.
I know we can't fund everything because money is tight, but when you look at things like the ammo costs, a lot of these things are driven by training and standards out of Raleigh. You have to meet a certain proficiency, you have to practice a certain amount, you have to shoot a certain amount of rounds, and then plus each officer has to carry about 30 to 35 rounds on their person, and ammo has an expiration date, so you don't want to be carrying 1 and 2 and 3-year-old ammunition, especially when you factor in the rifles that law enforcement is required to carry now. It's not like it used to be where you just can patrol around with a 38 special and about 8 extra rounds. I mean, the very well-armed criminals that we're dealing with, I know that weekly, these aren't always released to the press, but weekly there are automatic rifles and and many handguns taken off the streets, both in town and out of town, and we see the pictures of those. So to adequately respond to those things, these officers need to be armed, and they need to be able to count on their ammunition. And just other basic things. I mean, we're finding money in different places. I think with public safety being number 2, that we need to make sure that we find money. I know that education and that public safety are 1 and 2, and I think those things should be funded before all others to ensure the safety of the public, ensure the education of the kids, and our secondary education with the community college. But, you know, they're getting a pretty decent increase, and they're talking about going into our fund balance to fix buildings when they just got a 20-year tax increase to build more buildings that we're going to have to maintain. And so I think we need to look at this request. I know, like I said, Sheriff, we're not going to be able to fund everything. But I think we can probably find some to help out with these other important positions, especially the dispatchers. I agree with Mr. Owens and Mr. James. I felt like we kind of committed to it with the dispatchers when we were talking about this earlier and previously. And I think also that deputy out at DSS is a very important position. I think we have something like 44,000 people on food stamps in Pitt County. That's more people than the population of Wilson, North Carolina. And with the proximity of where DSS is, it's outside the city of Greenville, so if there's an emergency, the Greenville Police Department's not going to know about it. It's going to be for the sheriff to respond to unless mutual aid is called in if it's bad enough. But deputies aren't in the city. They're out in the county, and we don't want a 20-minute response if they're coming from a long way for something that needs to be an instant response. I think that's something that needs to be seriously looked at as well. And that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. I believe, Beth, you were next, and then Mr. James, and then Dave, and then we go back around.
I just want to make 2 references. One, based on the 2%, bringing it down to maybe 1 3/4. I think if we do bring it down that 3/4, that it needs to be spread out among other needs, you know, also meet some of these needs, but not verbally say that we would support all of that to go to this particular department. The other observation, first, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and what's been going on this past year as far as the Sheriff's Department is concerned. As I looked through this and as I listened, the way I see it, we have 12 requests, specific requests. And the manager and the finance director have recommended an increase in all but 2 of those. And one of those, and I agree with this, is looking back at that one position. And so I don't want it to look like we haven't supported any of these things. I know we didn't hit the mark, but we haven't hit the mark with anybody so far. And as I look ahead, we're not going to hit the mark, you know, per every request. So at least 10 of the 12, there has been an increase. And I think that, you know, we need to kind of know that. Thank you.
Good observation, Beth. Mr. James, I believe you said you had one more
Yes,
question.
I got about 2 more things.
One.
Number one, we need to be looking at ways that we can cut spending instead of increase spending. Because you might as well face it, the people in Pitt County are tired of higher taxes, and we've got to look at that. Number 2 is, and we're gonna have a problem with this one, Mr. Manager, I'm on the Board of Social Services. They're saying you have 77,000 or something down here pertaining to the deputy fees, but they're saying from social services, they are subsidizing the Sheriff's Department much more money than that. But we'll get into that when we go to our meeting on that. But all of this is going to have to be brought out as far as the total amount of money is concerned. And they're very much concerned, Mr. Manager, Mr. Chairman, pertaining to that. But I do think that we have to look at ways that we can, like ammunition. I know about ammunition. I was on a firing range for months. And you can, some people can shoot and some can't, Mr. Sheriff. You know that.
I agree.
And there's no ifs and ands about it. Some of them you can give 1,000 rounds and put them out there a month later, they still ain't gonna do it. I've been through that, down that line. So that's gonna be up to your department as to how much ammunition you're gonna need and so forth.
And we've taken that in consideration. I've already moved 2 people off the line.
Right,
because of that.
I know, I wasn't born yesterday, and I've been through a lot as far as shooting guns and so forth. But I think we have to look at all of these things, Mr. Chairman, I really do, and as I said, people want good law, I want good law enforcement, I support law enforcement all my life, but at the same time, there's a limit to where we can go. That's all I'm not saying.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mr. Sheriff, I know you know Sheriff Knight over in Edgecombe County.
Yes, sir.
He knows you and thinks very highly of you. At least he speaks very highly of you.
Thank you.
Well, I was doing revival at the Red Oak Church on Highway 44, and he happened to be in the audience that night. And when I came out, he said, Hammond, you ain't got no room in Greenville and in Pitt County because you got too many federal prisoners. That's why come y'all got Pitt County inmates over here in my jail in Tarboro. Well, anyway, at that time, we did have some inmates that was using space in Tarboro. But at the same time, if you get to the point where you got to have some ammunition, I know Glenn Bowen well enough that he'll trust me till I can bring him his money back to get whatever them Glocks or whatever you're using need. But I don't want you to run out of ammunition, especially if you're going to be patrolling my district.
Thank you, sir. We'll
Thank you,
provide
sir.
you with an excellent level of service, I promise.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Mr. Garrish?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on your reelection.
Thank you, Mr. Garris.
Hope you can say the same thing to me in November. Okay, just for my information, on the workload, the 59,000 business checks, are they kind of ride-through checks, or is it something more detailed than that?
Well, for most part, it's a ride-through. We require them to log their location in on the computer, and it's real simple, it's not time-consuming, so we can show where we've checked. If a question is break-in occurred at 3 o'clock, we checked it at 2, everything's fine, something like that. But also, at times, we get calls from some of our citizens, do you check my building and stuff, and we can send them that, and as well. But it's just a way of tracking our building checks and accountability.
Okay, good. If I look at your request in summary and do a quick adding here, it looks to me like you are requesting another $330,000 for the Sheriff's Department and about $125,000 for the detention center for a total of about $450,000. Now, do I add to that the 284 decreased revenues there so that your total need you're saying here is like 740? Those would be additive. Okay. What I would like to see us do, and I know we talked about the telecommunicator thing, and I want us to do what we said we would do. I think what I would be in favor of is maybe finding a little more revenue and then letting the sheriff allocate it to these needs the way he saw would be best serving him, because my observation would be the telecommunicators, but he may want to allocate some of those funds to some of these other needs and maybe hire fewer telecommunicators if that was practical. Again, my point is I would like for us to be able to figure out a way we could allocate him a little more money and then let him decide which one of these categories he wants to put it in, because I know we can't come up with another 750,000, but I appreciate your
I would like to add one comment, though. We are within our bottom line budget. If you look at our budget overall, we are within those means. What we've had to do is rob from other areas to meet our overtime needs. We've had to move money.
Don't rob nothing, Sheriff.
It's good, you're right.
That's
We've
good.
had
No,
to
but I
transfer.
commend you
Yeah, we've had to
from looking
transfer.
looking at other line items and
That's right.
moving your money around to the areas that you need. I commend you for that.
Yeah, and that's what we've
That's
had to
good
do.
management.
We just had to manage, and I don't want citizens to hear what I've said, and maybe take it wrong, that we are within our budget, and we've had to do without in other areas. And it's all, like you said, being a good manager, and we got good personnel that makes that happen.
Yeah, we
Very
may
good.
overdraw on a specific code, which will show the need that we had that year, which it will be putting another project on the back burner into the following year. I mean, like bulletproof vests or whatever our need is.
And by doing it this way, it gives you guys an actual number of what we need in that line item, you know.
Okay, thank
We're
you,
able to manage, and I like your idea, what you're saying about let us decide where it needs to go.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garris. As a follow-up to that, the visits that his patrol, you hit on, Jimmy, out in the county, I think is one of the most important things.
Yeah, I
that you can
agree.
do. You've got the visibility, and that's very effective.
And that number, 59,000, is impressive.
It is. And the next thing, though, the reason I asked the sheriff how many telecommunication positions he had was 8. He said, I find it hard to believe that you don't have time to go to the restroom, Sheriff, if you got 8 people in a position. That's a management position that Mr. Garris worked on. But I'm in favor of your position anyway. I just wanted to make that point. Mr. McLaughlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Neil, for your fine job that you're doing at the Sheriff's Department. I think you're running an efficient operation. The concern, how aggressively are we pursuing grants? I've read so many times that there have been some grants that's been given to you in terms of how aggressively are you doing that? And do you think some grants?
We're very aggressive on that. We have a person that constantly on the radar, so to speak, looking for grants.
We currently have 8.
You currently have 8 that right now that we're managing. You want to talk about those?
We currently have 8. We have our grant writer is here today. She can speak to that. But the paperwork involved with 8 grants, I don't know that the personnel we have can handle much more than 8.
Now,
Because
now this money that you get from grants, can that be used as deemed necessary, or do you have some that you?
it's specific. The grants, when they're written, are specific. The most current grant we're working on is updating our ID lab, and it's an equipment grant and a chemist. I think there's a chemist in there. We get funds, a co-grant with the city of Greenville, and we share what our needs are. And we don't have the flexibility to say, well, we asked for this, but we want to buy this. What we asked for initially in the grant, we pretty much have to stick with it. We have to say, it's this project we're gonna do, and we have to stick within the means of that project. Not that we can't say, well, we need an extra laptop and less office paper or office supplies, but pretty much it has to stick within the grant.
One of the things that alarmed me was the uniforms going into the court system, and some of them appear to the jeans appear to be cut and actually seeing their bodies. I think that is something that is quite embarrassing. Is there there's no money grants available for uniforms or?
Nothing that we're aware
Not
of.
that we're aware of. And the inmates themselves, some of them destroy those jumpsuits, and we've been sewing them back up for 10 years. Some of them have been sewn and sewn and sewn, but just, when you take 10,000 people in a year and you wash those uniforms with industrial cleaners, because, you wouldn't want to wear a uniform that some of these folks wore. And they're in the dryers and they're washed continually, and they're just cycling out. At one point, we were in good shape, and when the county took a hit a few years ago, that was one of the line items at the jail that was hit pretty hard. And we're just at a point that our uniforms for the inmates are just threadbare.
Yes, sir.
And the price has gone up. Used to, you could buy a jail jumpsuit for $12. Now it's 25.
Right.
They're made out of heavy-duty canvas, to last as long as possible. But just, you've got inmates that'll rip them just for pure meanness. We stitch those back up and continue to use them. And that inmate typically gets another uniform that has been sewed up. I mean, if we know the ones that are having problems, we don't give him a brand-new uniform the second time around. We give him one that's been repaired if he's a problem.
That's right. At the end, Mr. Manager, at the end of the day, I know you normally go back and look at monies that could be appropriated appropriately. What is your concerns about some of the things that are mentioned, and what are your plans in terms of?
Well, I guess my concerns are that right now we have maximized all the revenues that we feel like we can maximize without recommending a tax increase. If you do look at the discount rate, which we had proposed changing from 2% to 1%, and that would yield about $400,000. And again, we can't do that until the following fiscal year budget cycle because the Department of Revenue notice was due April 30th. If you reduce that down to 0.25%, and I recommend you keep something to keep those early taxes paid through escrows, that would yield us $700,000. So if you have $700,000, and theoretically if you were to fund animal control as proposed, and I realize that's the next presentation, of that $700,000, $400,000 you're setting aside for animal control for the following fiscal year, that nets you out $300,000. If we're going to take the fed bed inmate count down to 60 from 65, that then fills that revenue gap, but then there's not another dollar to do the $450,000 that Commissioner Garris had mentioned, an expansion that the sheriff is wanting. Unless we're looking at cutting in other departments, whether internal or external, that's really the dilemma. One go-to source we've had in the past, I don't really know that it is this year, maybe the following fiscal year, ABC Board. Talked to Vice Chairman Webb about that, and they did just open a new store, and the current distribution is $1.2 million in the current fiscal year. We upped it, I think, $100,000 last year, so I'm not sure if they could take another $100,000 deduction of their revenue or transfer of their revenue to the county. But we've, in terms of ad valorem taxes, the percentage rate, we've adjusted that to what we feel is the maximum. Sales tax we've taken up from 2 to 3%. Actually, Dwayne had it at 2%. I had him take it up to 3% to generate revenue. I mean, it was conservative to begin with, and we just took it a step above it. Unless we're looking at cutting in other areas, Commissioner McLaughlin, I don't know where this kind of money is going to come from.
Okay.
And unless, I hate to even throw it out there, unless you're not going to do animal control expansion, and then you want to look at allocating that money, that $400,000 pot. You can still do that out of the fund balance for the year one, with the thought that in year two you reduce the discount rate, and then you'd have that money freed up so you don't have to find it in the general fund per se.
I don't think it's quite fair for us to expect you to give an answer to these individual questions today, Scott. We've got other agencies that are coming in that we've got to review and see what their requests are, in addition to what you've proposed. But it gives you an overture that we can work with, and I believe, Mr. Johnson, you're next,
Thank you, Mr.
and
Chairman.
Mr. Gass, and then Beth.
Mr. Elks, I believe you will agree with us that putting together a budget for Pitt County is a difficult process.
Yes, it is.
We can agree with that.
And we're faced with a very difficult decision in putting together a budget. And we appreciate all the effort that you have made in helping us put together the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gass.
I did have one question. Don't want to prolong this discussion, but are we required by law to furnish our residents with uniforms?
Sir,
We are required by law.
sir.
Man,
Yes, sir.
I mean, they had clothes before they were arrested. Why couldn't they wear those same clothes? But you're saying the law won't allow us to do that.
The law requires that we give them underwear, jumpsuits, shoes, just certain minimal things. But it also, with the jumpsuit, we know our jumpsuits. We know the washing of their own clothes and putting them back to the correct inmate would be
Be a nightmare.
impossible. And they also gain weight while they're in the jail. So oftentimes when they're released, their clothes don't even fit them anymore.
And the jumpsuit is one size fits all.
Right.
Well, not exactly, but they're
Close.
close.
Okay, thank you.
And with the revenues, we're hated to have to predict 60, but we would rather be conservative in what we think we're going to get rather than over-project and come in short. I mean, we're hoping our Fed count will go back up to 70 or 80 and we have the space for them, but we wanted to be realistic based on current numbers because we didn't want there to be a gap at the end of the year where we said we could do this. We wanted to be upfront and let you know that it is going to be down more than likely.
But we'll give you our word that we're actively seeking inmates daily.
Mr. Garris, I had the same thing about the clothes they wear in. I think most people would rather have the street clothes when they go to court anyway, and I don't
would
believe there's
think
any
so.
law prohibit them having their street clothes on. It might be an administrative problem with the sheriff to have to change to do this and that and other. That's where the problem comes in, I'm sure. Thank you. Bill?
I like to hear you say jumpsuits instead of uniforms, because in this box it says uniforms for our officers, and then we're saying uniforms for inmates, so I like the use of the word jumpsuits. The other thing is there a limit on the amount of ammo that you can use when you're qualifying on the qualifying range?
Every course is a 50-round course. So
Okay.
you have to have practice. Generally, we have several practices. And then if he fails to qualify, you have to provide him another 50 round. And then you have to qualify at nighttime. The same weapons have to do day and night. And then you have to shoot a combat course, and you have to shoot that. So the minimum you could get by was 300 rounds per person.
Well, I
This
mean,
is a
and
perfect
that's
shot.
a maximum limit for each one of the three that you're talking about. I
if
just
they-
wondered, and the other thing I'd like to say is to reiterate the fact that, I don't remember which one of the commissioners said it, but I don't think we need to be looking at projecting money that will be, right now, additional money, because I think they're at a limit, but we may be able to go. But one of the things that we are increasing is the jumpsuits for inmates by $20,000. So I still don't want it to appear to the citizens that we have not looked at this. So that only leaves one area that we're not going to look at right now for increase. So thank you very much.
Let me just add, we do not, if an officer doesn't qualify with the amount of ammo that we give each officer to qualify with, then they lose their job as an officer and they are sent to the detention center. And if they want to try and qualify, they're required to buy their own ammunition and get proficient to be brought back as a deputy sheriff.
Right, I have a friend who had to qualify, and he was in an administrative education position with the prison department. And after a certain amount, and it was not 50 rounds, if they didn't qualify, they had to pay up front
Yeah,
for whatever
it's up
else
to that
it took.
individual. If they
And
want to be a deputy sheriff, they have to go on their own time.
Yeah.
And with their own money and ammo and get proficient. We just don't give them unlimited amounts to
Right.
keep them. We
Well,
give
50
them,
rounds seems like a lot, but it's probably not.
That's just
Thank
the
you very
course, yeah.
much.
no, it's not.
All right, Reverend Hammond, your shot again.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, one of my dear friends and someone that you know asked me a question that really hurt my feelings, but then knowing you like I know you, I was able to get over it. She said, David, do he have anything else to wear besides that uniform? I said, I think so. I said, if he didn't, he would do it. And one day I was sitting down there next to Glenn, and I said, Glenn, I said, have you all a uniform? Have your detective budget been cut? And your answer to me was, I like this uniform. What's wrong with it? Don't it look all right? I said, yeah. I said, but she called the roll. She called up Ralph Tyson and Billy Bannerford and Mike Mann and all them. She said, them tall men, anytime you saw them, they were sharp. I said, well, the sheriff thinks he's sharp when you see him in his uniform. I said, and that, I'll leave it at that. And so I know you have saved some money out of your budget, but not having a uniform account, a clothing allowance. Is that correct?
We have a clothing allowance for our detectives, but I require everybody.
For your detectives?
Yeah, I require my detectives to have a uniform as well. If we have emergency, a hurricane, tornado, I expect them to report to work as a deputy sheriff.
But they only have one uniform.
Yeah.
Sheriff, I don't believe that's got much to do with the budget. Let's move on to the,
That do have something to do with the budget.
well, I disagree, but that's your opinion, Dave. He's responded. Do you need to respond to
No,
him
I'm fine.
anymore? All right, Mr. James.
No, I'm through. I've already
I thought
said.
you raised your hand, Eugene.
Well,
You
I'm
want to preach
sorry,
again, Dave?
I've spoken, but while I'm talking, of course, there is other departments that we might be able to take a little money. But I'm like Jimmy, I'm not saying 750, maybe 100,000, something like that. I'm not for raising his taxes.
We think the county manager did a really good job with
I
our
think he has
budget.
to.
And these are just areas that we would like more funds.
Yeah.
We realize you might not can fund them
Yep.
all, but these are just the needs that we see.
Well, we all want more, and we need more. I'm not saying we don't, but when you don't have it, I'm in that line of work. I'd like to have more money, but to heck with it.
Mr. Colson?
Well, I'll go back to the ammunition. I'm glad that to requalify that they have to buy their own ammunition. I was thinking that myself. But as far as the revenue here, is the facility big enough to where you could actually have private citizens come out there, say, one weekend a month? And you could actually train them for a fee or go through certain things? Some might enjoy going through the combat, whatever. I mean, you could charge several $100s. People would probably flock to that. But I don't know how big the facility is as far as being able to
Come on,
provide such a
farms.
service, but it might be a revenue stream.
Well, if you're speaking of firearms qualification, we do ours through the community college, and we have to have permission from the college to go out and use the facility. We schedule dates. It would have to be a sheriff's office or a law enforcement function to do that. On the other hand, if the county had arranged, that would be a great opportunity.
Just a thought. Planting a
I
seed.
like it.
Thank you. I believe we've gone around. Is there anyone that's got a question that they in dire need to ask?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Manager, did you want to respond, son?
Yes, if I could just recap, I was just looking at the 3 different cost centers of the sheriff. Obviously, you have the sheriff's office, you have the detention center, then you have jail health. And all 3 of those cost centers combined, as recommended, is $26.2 million for the new year. If you compare it to the current year we're sitting in, it was $26.8 million. And you might say, well, that's a big cut from 26.8 to 26.2. But remember, we had the one-time infusion of dollars in the current year we're sitting in. He had a new telephone system, recorder, and some other expenses. So if you go back a year to 12-13, let's go back, compare these 3 years, his budget was $24.9 million for all 3 cost centers. So let's just compare fiscal year 12-13 at 24.9 compared to what I'm proposing at 26.2. That's a 5.2% increase at $1.3 million. I guess my point is, public safety is one of the top priorities of the county, and it is something that has had additional appropriations too. If my math is incorrect, these kind of back of the envelope calculations I've done with my calculator, but my point is you as a board, the county has been appropriating dollars to public safety, even as we've climbed out of the recession as a top priority of the county.
Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
We will now have a 5-minute break, and then we'll go on to the next one. Well, we're back in session now, and before we have Michelle to make her presentation, I want the manager to, he wanted a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning we do have Michelle Whaley, our animal shelter, animal control director, before you. This is probably her first presentation in my 13th time of doing this. Obviously, we have a major service expansion proposal before you, as directed by the board, to consider the canine control element of the shelter operations and animal control. So that's why we have her before you this morning. She does have a PowerPoint presentation to run through. Some of this you've heard from the discussions over the last 6 months on the ordinance development. I think probably the part you haven't heard fully is the other side, that being the budget side of the equation. So we want to allow Michelle time to present this to you, and then I'm sure Dwayne and I can step in where needed to add to it. So Michelle?
Good morning. Thank you
Good
for
morning.
allowing me this opportunity. So without delay. Very briefly, the order of the presentation will be who we are, where we've been, where we're going, and challenges that lie ahead. Who we are. The primary mission of the Pitt County Animal Control and Shelter Services is to provide services which safeguard public health and safety by supporting the education of our citizens on responsible pet ownership, protect our community's animals from cruelty and neglect, and house, care, place, and/or provide humane resolution for the animals in our care.
You said if they see a badge, she got on one.
The services provided are animal care and control, records and data, ordinance enforcement, complaint and bite investigations, abuse and neglect response, housing of strays and lost animals, transfers and adoptions, and euthanasia. As you've seen this slide many times before, our staff consists of myself, Fred Wade, Assistant Manager and Animal Control Officer, 3 other officers, and 2 part-time temporary helps. And of course, we couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. Okay, where we've been. In 2013 to 14, we reduced our intakes and increased our live release rates. It was our best year ever for lowest euthanasia numbers and highest live release rates. We completed the first ever animal control strategic plan. We reviewed the commissioner-driven draft of the Canine Control Ordinance and provided input. We continued to acquire grants for facility improvements and community services. We participated in several community awareness events. We expanded our utilization of volunteers, and we strengthened our community partnerships. New this year that I was especially proud of is East Carolina University is now offering a dog fitness walking class where the students come, exercise the shelter animals, and receive class credit for it. So we just finished our first semester of that, so that was really exciting. Our statistics in 2013, we had 3,224 intakes. Again, that's our lowest number since we took over operations in 2012. Our adoptions were 1,140. The reclamations, 167. Our euthanasia was 1,835. Again, our lowest record to date. So far, January through April of this year, our intakes are at 919, adoptions 384, reclamations 43, and euthanasia 416. Due to high public interest, in January, we revised our tracking form for animal bites, particularly dog bite data, where we're collecting data in more detail. I have also been working with Dr. Morrow on revising and updating the actual animal bite reporting form that the medical offices use in our county. So this just shows January through March dog bites. Where they were, City of Greenville, Pitt County, whether they were off-leash or on-leash, whether they were tethered, whether the bite occurred in their home, and whether they were on or off their property. So where we're going. This slide represents the 3 aspects of what our department does. We have enforcement and animal control, which is public safety. We try to rehome as many animals as possible, which is our adoption. And lastly, we try to educate the citizens on what responsible pet ownership is. Our budget highlights: expansion of the shelter staff to meet the state codes, expansion of the field officer staff to accommodate the transition and implementation of the new Canine Control Ordinance, startup costs associated with expansion of staff, increase in the owner surrender fee to match the municipal drop-off fee. Currently, we do charge the municipalities $20 to bring an animal to the shelter, and the owner requested euthanasia fee was only $15. So to make that fair to everyone involved, we've asked that that fee be the same. Implementation of new dog licensing fee structure in the unincorporated area of Pitt County, and reduced our adoption revenue projected due to the transition year. This is our budget overview. I think you've already had this before you. What you'll see is it is a transition process. Year one is getting the staff and the resources to outfit new officers and implement and develop the licensing registration program. And then year two would be the facility cost of expanding our space to be able to house all of the animals that we need to in Pitt County. Art, I'm
Michelle,
sorry.
Can we maybe go over
Sure.
the budget, just to allow me, if the board would? On the budget overview, okay, so the current year, the first column there, what is currently budgeted within animal control is that total of $447,549 with the associated expenses as outlined on the revenue and expenditure side. So for the manager recommended column in 14-15, rabies revenues go up slightly, anticipating a few more rabies. Animal pickup goes up by factor of 5,000. Animal adoption fees, we're cutting in half, going from 70,000 to 35,000. We figure that probably with the year one transition to a canine control ordinance, that there'll probably be less adoptions. Animal reclamation fees is going up because we figure more dogs will be coming in the shelter. For animal nuisance fees, we have that going up because we figure there'll be more of those fees coming in. Miscellaneous fees goes up slightly. The animal citation fees, obviously, that one and the animal registration fees in the current year, that's not in place because the ordinance hasn't been passed and those fees are not into place. But we're anticipating $75,000 for the citation fees and a revenue stream initially of $166,000 for the registration fees. And that was the $10 for an altered, 20 unaltered, and then you had the 3-year license, 25 and 50, I believe, as I remember the numbers. The general fund subsidy in that year one is $772,000. The following fiscal year for 15-16, after things start to level out, you can see the numbers are tweaked and adjusted. The biggest one there is the animal registration fees going from $166,000 to $331,000. And I believe, remind me, Dwayne, if I'm countywide enforcement, assuming the municipalities would buy in to allow the animals in their jurisdiction to be registered, the dogs, right, just the dogs, for animal registration fees. If not, that was when I was saying yesterday, we'd probably have to have another conversation with the municipalities as to how we're going to house their dogs, animals, if they're not willing to allow that to occur within the municipalities. Because right now, the $166,000 for the new year, July 1, only represents unincorporated, because obviously we can't, it'd be very hard to get the municipalities by July 1 to allow this to go into place. So year one budget, $1,098,990. Year two, $1,269,836.
And if I can add, we added the general fund subsidy line so that you would realize and be able to clearly see how much general fund is currently subsidizing animal control. So today, you're subsidizing it with general fund dollars to the tune of $339,000, and so that $400,000 difference represents the expansion.
Then on the bottom half of that slide, the expenditures, you see the salary and fringe, operating contracts, debt service is probably the big one. And that, obviously, current year that we're sitting in, there's no debt service. Next year, year one, there'd be no debt service. That'd be a year of planning in terms of shelter expansion and then hopefully construction. Then we have in year two, debt service of $150,000 for principal and interest on expansion of the existing shelter at the County Home Road location.
And that's projecting a $1.2 million expansion financed over a period of 10 years. That's what that debt service is predicated upon.
Over how long?
10 years.
And again, this is not a new shelter on a new location. This is expansion of the existing shelter at the existing location. 1.2 million compared to a whole brand new operation is, what do we say?
2.5.
Okay, double
2.4
that.
to 2.5.
Okay. Michelle?
Thanks. Expansion, we need additional staff to meet the North Carolina code and accommodate the new ordinance. Put in for 8.5 shelter attendant positions, 3 new animal control officers, 2 office support, and 1 supervisor. And just to let you know how we came up with these positions, we compared other counties that Pitt County normally compares. Rowan County, Union, Cabarrus, all the counties that we always compare ourselves to. We also have a study from Shelter Planners, which is an independent business that does these studies. They backed up what we were requesting. And there's also a national formula that you can find on the National Animal Control Association website that was looked at as well. I also talked to other counties. Johnston County, when they enacted a canine control type ordinance, they had a 30% increase in their volume, and also advised me that 70% of their total call volume was driven by those type of complaints. The facility planning for the projected increase in dog intakes due to the new ordinance, again, 14-15 will be a transition year. I've already looked at ways to redesign our existing space to try to allow more holding cages for the strays coming in, and still have a small portion designated for adoption, and do the best we can with what we have. We'll also start planning for an expansion, asking for bids, et cetera. And then in 15-16, hopefully actually see that additional facility built. All right. The canine control ordinance, the purpose is to address roaming dogs in the unincorporated Pitt County. Hunting dogs are excluded. Dogs will not be allowed to be off the owner's property without restraint as defined in the ordinance. Civil penalties imposed for non-compliance, and this will be a change. Impounded dogs shall be microchipped at the owner's expense. Currently, we ensure that they have the rabies vaccination that's required by law before they're allowed to return to their owner if proof cannot be provided. And now we will be able to ask them to microchip their pet and collect the fee for that service before going home, which will help us hopefully reunite lost pets quicker and identify who those owners are. The dog licensing and registration applies to dog owners in unincorporated Pitt County in the first year, with the plan to expand countywide in the second year. Tied to the rabies vaccination dates, we'll have 1- and 3-year options. There is differential licensing for spayed and neutered pets versus unaltered pets. We'll be able to register by a county website, the county animal shelter, or hopefully participating vets' offices. The specialty licensing available will be for multiple dogs. And again, this is more for our backyard breeders, or what you may have heard lately as puppy mills. We do have those exist in Pitt County. This will give us a way to regulate them. The only thing we really have now is neglect and cruelty cases, which are very costly to prosecute, plus a lot of them do just the bare minimum. And so that ordinance isn't effective for us, but it'll give us the right to go in, know exactly how many dogs they have, and collect a licensing fee. A show breeder and a hunting dog. This, again, and I want to say this will not affect your citizen that has maybe 1 or 2 personal pets and breeds them once or twice a year. Challenges for 15 and 16 and beyond, space needs. We definitely need more holding space for both our dogs and cats. Continue to meet the North Carolina State Code for animal sheltering. Implement and maintain the animal licensing registration system. The countywide dog licensing and registration, the compilation and enhancement of our existing ordinances to further our public safety efforts, and education programs for citizens on responsible pet ownership. I'm excited that I do have one elementary school that is committed that I can come in next year to their 4th graders, which is where the program's designed to target, and start the pilot program on responsible pet ownership for next year. And that's all I have for you as far as the PowerPoint, and now I will answer all the questions I can.
All right, Mr. Elliott, you want to start?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as I had alluded yesterday, we're proposing an effective date of January 1 for the ordinance implementation. Assuming the boards will adopt the ordinance, that'll allow Michelle time to gear up, to hire staff, to prepare for that. Also give them, as that last point in her last slide said, education programs for citizens on responsible pet ownership. We feel like the public needs some education, or you hate to use the word forewarning, but education to know what the ordinance that will be in effect come January 1, what they need to do to comply. So that's what we're recommending as in the total picture of this.
Mr. Gash, let's start at that end, come around.
Thank you for your presentation. I think that we have made tremendous progress in our animal control here in Pitt County over the last few months. I thanks to lots of people. If I look at this budget overview, that means, and this is not new to us, we know this, that in this budget, we're going to be increasing our budget by 2.5 times versus this year. And then in 15-16, it's going to be essentially 3 times as much as the current budget. That is a significant increase, and I know the reasons for all of that, and I support all of that. But my question is, this is primarily focused on dogs. When we get this dog issue resolved, are we going to come back then and say we need to do the same thing for cats? Or is cats not a problem? Because we haven't talked about cats.
Cats, in my opinion, are a problem. We do have many, many cats that come through the shelter, and we do not have adequate space for them. But we can only kind of attack one thing at a time, to be honest. I mean, licensing, these are going to be big projects. I want them to be done right and correctly. But cats, we will continue our education efforts and our efforts about spay and neutering and trying to decrease, especially some of these populations. You know, people don't realize one cat can produce 60 kittens a year. So that's something we have to continue to doing, is keep up the education, keep providing them the services of Spay Today and other veterinarians. But yes, we can't ignore that we also have an over-pet population of cats.
But on the education program that you're going to be doing at one of the schools and hopefully expanding that, it is going to be animal ownership and focus on both dogs and cats, right?
It is. Moore County developed this program, and they've done all the hard work for us. It's wonderful because it ties in nicely to the school curriculum with their character education and so forth. And it does cover all the hot, difficult topics. It not only talks about, it does cover euthanasia. It does cover spay and neuter. It does cover animal bites. It is a very thorough program, and I'm really excited about bringing it to Pitt County.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Malone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Yell, for that excellent presentation. Now, as we've heard the public outcry over and over on this matter, and as of January the 1st, effective date of this, it's going to be implemented. And so we certainly are glad to see this. One of the things that have been brought to my attention, and it's been quite repeatedly, people are calling about the hunting dogs. And certainly, and you explained that in your presentation, that they were excluded. Now, what, if any, measure hunting dogs, are they going to be doing, are you going to be doing any other kinds of things for hunting dogs in terms of, in this overall proposal?
The only thing that may affect hunters, and in being here 12 years, we have very responsible hunters in this county. We have had very little interaction with them. They do not cause the problems. The only thing that would be under the specialty licenses. If they have 21 or over dogs, it would be a $100 fee. I have not had any backlash or public outcry from the hunters. Again, this is going to take a lot of education efforts, you know, to educate the citizens and see if we receive that feedback. This has been implemented in other counties and been very successful.
Right. I think that this is the way that the people have brought to my attention. They certainly don't want to have any harshness implemented on them for hunting dogs, because they don't have a problem with that now. And I concur with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am very much interested in our taking a positive approach to unruly dogs, and it's not just unruly dogs, but unruly dog owners. But if we choose to have a pet dog, we need to be responsible owners. And I believe that you do need the staff to handle the problems associated with unruly dogs and unruly dog owners. And I appreciate what you do, and I believe the other members of this board appreciate what you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michelle, as you know, we've got a lot of challenges this year, and I think one of my concerns, at least from what the public will view, is that we're going to give, or we're looking at giving more money to this than we are to the community college and the public schools, as far as increases go, not total budgets go. Is that the absolute minimum amount of money that we have to contribute to this at this
I
time?
believe with the proper staffing, looking at the formulas, looking at our sizing study, that's what we need to get it going and to do an adequate job. When you look at the size of the county, you know, and officers having to go all the way to Bethel to get one dog, or, you know, it takes a while. You know, it would be nice to have 2 officers in every geographical area just to serve the citizens quicker and faster and, you know, as a safety aspect. So I do believe the size of our county, 6 officers is the minimum we need. And we definitely need the office support. The Animal Welfare Act with the codes and the laws that we have to keep the shelter up to standards is very time consuming, and they are very serious about it when they come to inspect. So I do believe that is the minimum.
And that is if we just do the full suite, if we don't do a gradual implementation, if we do a full implementation. The licensing fee, was that just for breeders, or is that just for every pet owner?
It's divided on, it's every pet owner would have $10 or $20 for 1 year, 25 and 50 for 3 year. The specialty licenses are just 5 to 10 dogs. If they own 5 to 10 dogs, $45, 11 to 20 dogs, $70, and 21 and over, $100. Other counties had much higher fees than that. With this being new, it doesn't need to be, you know, too high, but it will help us, number one, know where there's large packs of animals in our county. You know, the more you add, they do get the pack mentality, and it would be nice for us to be able to know where they're located in our county. Especially if they're not spayed and neutered, that can cause problems. Again, I'm not concerned with our hunters. I have very little problems with our hunters. The biggest problem we probably have is for the backyard breeders or puppy mills. We are a safe haven for those type of operators because of the North Carolina laws. You know, neglect and cruelty, if you have to go in and press charges, that's very costly. You have to house them and wait for court prosecution. So I'm most excited that that'll give us a handle on where those are. Unfortunately, there's no law against these people selling sick animals to the public, but at least if we know who they are and identify them and keep a check on them and have the authority to do so, we can maybe cut that type of operation down in our county.
Well, I think that's a good thing for breeders especially, but like, for example, my mom has a Dachshund that spends 90% of its life sitting on the couch. She has to pay $10 a year for that.
Unfortunately, yes, sir.
And if mom doesn't pay it, what happens?
Well, we have to develop the licensing and registration system. I mean, I like the idea of you send out the notices and you get a second notice, and, you know, then that's for the commissioners to decide, you know, what kind of licensing program and what penalties will be imposed. That's still going to have to be developed completely.
Okay, and just as far as that, I mean, it's just an annoying, I mean, the dog doesn't do anything. The few times it does move is just to go outside and use the bathroom or eat. But at the same time, it's kind of weird to rent your pet from the government for $10 a year, especially one that's in no danger of actually roaming. Or, I mean, if it was to actually roam, it would take 6 to 8 weeks just to get out of the yard. So it just seems like a lot of money to pay, or not a lot of money, but it just seems like an annoyance for people who don't have dogs that could potentially roam. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Michelle, has there ever been any location of where these packs of wild dogs are roaming? Is there any given area in the county that they are more prevalent than any others?
If I had to say, a lot of our time is spent in the Belvoir area, Old River Road area, or where there's multiple mobile home parks. That seems to be where a lot of those type of calls come from. Also, Grimesland area, there's a large mobile home community there. You often find sometimes, you know, the population is transient, you know, different owners coming in and out. They leave dogs. They're not altered. They're left to breed, so they become more feral. which makes it harder to catch. So I would say from our call volume, that's where a majority of those type of calls come in from.
Have you ever had any type of roundup for those dogs, or those, hadn't had the funds to do it with, I suppose?
No, sir, and with 3 officers to service the whole county with limited resources.
Mr. Manager, I'd like for you, as we go on around, to think upon this question here. There's been some reference that next tax year, or next year, it's gonna double the budget. The second year, it's gonna triple the budget. I want you to be able to tell this board what tax increase that's gonna require to fund that. Ms. Ward?
Okay, 2 or 3 things. Do we have a comparison to the other counties you mentioned, like Rowan and whatever, as to if this is funded? How does that compare, the full funding, compared to those counties that are, you know, like us?
I do have a spreadsheet of all those counties that Pitt County uses to compare. I don't know if you just want me to hit a couple or.
Just one or two as far as the total budget is concerned.
Okay, Cabarrus County has a $2 million budget. Iredell County is $1,098,330. Catawba is $222,000, but their population is much lower. New Hanover is $1,127,000, and Rowan is $541,000.
Okay. The other thing, you mentioned education prior to the January implementation of all of this, if this is approved. I think that has to be a really, really big focus. I think you need to get a group together, whether it's your volunteers or who, to hit the clubs, you know, not the clubs. Clubs have a different meaning for older people like me, but the organizations that are organized and that meet on a regular basis within the county and municipalities all over, I think it would be a good program for them to have, and they're always looking for good programs. But I think we need to really get a focus. I know it's important to get into the schools, but I also think it's very important to get to these adults. You might even look for some invitations to hunting clubs. Let's see, okay. I think you spoke about this according to a question that was asked, but when you hear $100, you know, for registering or whatever we're calling it, that covers all the dogs they have.
Yes,
right?
ma'am, it's not
At
per
the
animal.
maximum, and it's less if you have less than that maximum number. And can you pay for this registration online? I thought I saw that somewhere.
We are hoping to work with the MIS department to develop a way they
Good.
could simply pay online
Thank
through the
you.
county website.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Mr. Coates?
Well, the whole reason this is before us, because it's a very passionate subject. This Commissioner Chamber has been at least 3 times filled to capacity, standing room only. There was at least one meeting where I found out after the fact that many people that wanted to attend were turned away because the room was so full. Second thing is, I believe the funding is justified, and where we're going to get the money from is, the manager's already talked about this, is that the reduction of the discount from 2% to 1% will raise a big portion of that, and then there's the fees and other things. One of the things that I believe is, and that I'm hoping that eventually will happen, is that we will end up with instead of a whole bunch of separate ordinances controlling the animals, but we'll have one completely comprehensive animal control ordinance. As far as the cats that was brought up before, cats can be a problem. They can get on a car, they can scratch up the paint, but literally cats don't normally jump out from underneath the steps and bite you on the leg. Usually we hear about that from dogs that are out there. One of the things I'd like to suggest, if you do on a website, is to have one other box on there for a solicitation of extra funds. People like me, we would put, we'll register our dogs, and then we may decide to give 50, 100, maybe even more in addition. And that might be a revenue stream that could be dedicated for some things. As far as the dog that Glenn, you described our dachshund exactly. And And of course, we have a fenced-in backyard, and she runs around in it and everything. But I could go outside, and I could be bitten by a dog. That's not mine. That is running loose, or could be owned by somebody else. And as far as paying the thing, it's kind of like taxes. Is we pay money into the tax system for the sheriff's department for protection of the entire society. And I think that with the fees and so on, much of the responsibility for raising the money is going to come from the people that actually own the animals. But overall, I think it was an excellent presentation. It's long overdue, and I hope that we don't do anything to derail this. This is a significant and much-needed improvement to our ordinances in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Mr. James?
Well, I've got so much concern, I don't know where to start. But number one is, the first thing we have to do is adopt an ordinance. I don't need to tell you that. And we're talking about spending all this money before we even adopt one. The next thing I want to know, and our attorney, I would like for her to be very much involved. We talk about the unincorporated area of Pitt County. All of you, Greenville, Aden, they have a dog ordinance. And I'm very much concerned that why aren't they involved, if we're going to take care of their dogs, that they bring the problems to us? Why are not they involved in this? Why are not they paying their share when money is so tough to come by for the county? Nobody's asking those questions. The next thing that certainly that I'm very much concerned with is, and I want you to find out, how many dog pens do we have at the shelter? How often do those dog pens become available? How many dogs are being put out and how many are sold on the line, if you know anything about dogs? Now, let me say this to you. I'm not just talking. I've dealt with dogs all of my life. I depended upon dogs a long time ago even for a living when I was a little boy. So don't tell me about that. Now, at the same time, cats will be a problem, not biting, but what we're concerned with right now is controlling the dog population. Whether you want to face it or not, that's our problem. The number of dogs in Pitt County has got to be reduced. Now, how are we going to do it? That's the big problem. And that's the problem that we've got to face for the future, not today. Instead of people, the expense going up, if we do the job right, it ought to come down. Because we ought to take in to be able to control that number that we do have. And it can be done. I know Edgecombe County is not spending any of the money you're talking about, and they got the law enforcement, the sheriff's doing it. It's not got in here anywhere how we are going to cooperate with the sheriff's department. And unless you have teeth in this thing, you are not going to succeed, and you're going to find it out. They don't look at this guy coming out there with a uniform, he's got no gun, he's got no badge. They aren't going to pay much attention to him. And unless we can combine it with them, we've got a lot of things that need to be improved, and you might as well face it. Now, as far as the $400,000, it's not $400,000, it's $450,000, I believe, isn't it, Mr. Manager? Approximately that. Additional money. Is this the best that we can do? Can't we look at ways that we might be able to cut down on that particular figure and do the same job? But I see, I've got one or two more things, but I wanted to really know, what responsibility does the county have pertaining to the control of dogs and cats as far as your city of Greenville, Bappa? I know Bappa's got one. I get calls up there about it. And these other ones. What responsibility do we have pertaining to that? And is other places responsible to share this as we partake? Remember now, unincorporated in Pitt County is probably not even 50,000 people. Did you know that? Take all the rest of them out, and how much do you have? but I doubt if it's 50,000. Am I wrong?
Say that again?
Am I wrong as far as unincorporated, unincorporated?
Unincorporated.
Oh, the total is, I mean, Greenville itself is.
Oh,
close to
Green was what,
80,000.
80,000
Yeah.
in itself. But I'm talking about, then you got Aden, you got Farmville, you got
Sure.
Pepper, you got all these others. So you're not talking about, and dog bites, all you have to do is look at what's been shown you, are more in Greenville than there is where? All the other areas combined. I think it was 29 or something like that. So you got to bring all of these people in and don't put it upon the burden just of us to take and to come up with this money. But I think the first thing that we've got to do is to decide on the ordinance that we're gonna have and how it should be used and subsidized. See, I'm a firm believer that we ought to have another site for our animal shelter. Manager knows that. We've had complaints about dog things. So I think we're just jumping in there, we're talking about spending all this money before we are really prepared to take in to do the job that we need to do. And I think it takes planning, and you don't do it overnight. I think Commissioner Gass had the right idea in the beginning. Come up here, let's do it, piecemeal, but have it organized to take and say, we are going to do these things. That's all I got to say.
Mr. Chairman? Can I and staff address these questions? I think we can
Yes.
get those right now, one by one. In terms of another site for a new shelter, as we identified in here, there's $150,000 for debt service. That would double if we look at a new site and start from.
I realize
zero.
that, but
Okay. In terms of what responsibility does the county have for municipalities and their holding their dogs, we don't have responsibility other than for dangerous dog through the health director. Janice, correct me?
Rabies control.
Rabies control.
Our legal responsibilities are fairly minimal with regard to animal control.
What have we done about that? Have we consulted with them?
Well, last year,
Yes.
I believe it was last year, didn't we double there from $10 to $20, the per dog rate they pay when they bring a dog in? Now, that doesn't really cover the cost.
No.
That's why we're proposing in here that the animal registration fees, that they agree through an interlocal agreement or MOU or whatever it would be, that they allow the county to adopt a countywide animal registration fee system to yield us the $331,000 countywide. And to address Chairman Owens' question about the budget doubling and tripling, yes, it does, but it's predicated upon, as Commissioner Colson said, the discount rate factor of that revenue coming in, as well as these fees will balance it. There wouldn't be necessarily that much more general fund dollar appropriation that would be needed. In terms of cutting or trimming the budget proposed, the staff we've gone through this for a couple of months now. It's been through the Animal Control Advisory Board. We feel like to adequately do the job that's before us, this is what is needed. I will say the budget for 14-15, as developed before you, is fully loaded beginning July 1. So we may have some latitude in there in the first year because we're not going to be hiring people all July 1. So there might be some latitude in there to take some of those resources to allocate sheriff or education or
I thought
otherwise.
you said January 1.
Well, the enforcement, the effective date would be January 1. We do have to hire ahead of time, officers, train them and so forth, but we wouldn't be hiring them July 1. We did want to show you a fully loaded budget year over year so you can compare 14-15 against 15-16, but we might be able to, or we can, reduce some of the first year expenditures because we're not going in full force July 1. So there is some capacity there to look at some reallocations. In terms of the Sheriff's Department, there is language in the beginning as a whereas statement saying that it will take cooperation and joint cooperation of the Sheriff's Office. And yes, Mr. James, it will. And we've invited the sheriff to the table and his staff, and they have came to the Animal Control Advisory Board meetings, and it will take them to be out there in some cases jointly responding to calls and helping and assisting. In terms of how many pens at the shelter, Michelle, can you?
Yes. Currently, the way the shelter is configured now, we have 25 dog holding pens and 12 cats. On the adoption floor, 31 dogs and 10 cats. Moving forward, I'm looking at having 39 holding cages for the dogs, and again, cats aren't changing, and on the adoption floor, 16 dogs. And also, I just want to mention about Edgecombe County. Mr. James, who is under the Sheriff's Department, serves on my State Association board with me. And I don't know if you are aware, Tarboro has an animal shelter that has
Yes.
30 pens, and Edgecombe has 30 pens. So combined, they have 60 pens, which is much more than what I have allocated to me. Also, their statistics, if you compare our adoption efforts, don't really compare. But the reason they don't have a containment law or a leash law is because Eugene James told the sheriff, we have to identify space. And the sheriff wasn't going to allocate more staff in a new facility. So that's why they went their different direction.
I'm right there at Edgecombe County. They call the deputy sheriff, and that sheriff comes out there, and that dog, they carry him to court.
Correct. They
No
have
ifs and
3
ands about it.
deputies.
Immediately, they're carried to court. And those, it has broke, they don't have any problems that are like that now. Those hunters get off that land,
Out there where you live, Mr. James?
oh, yes, and right on down the line, but I've got one or two I won't do.
Mr. James, I have
Come
had
back
some
at you.
informal conversations with the sheriff regarding the canine control ordinance, and, I mean, just, they were kind of off-the-cuff conversations, but his initial reaction was that they would be happy to help out. However, it would take additional resources and manpower, because his manpower is already constrained as is. So that was his initial reaction. So, I mean, he's willing to help, but he's
Well, I
saying
know.
resources.
You finished, Ms. James?
No, there's one more thing. You're talking about hiring 8.5 more employees to go out into the field, am I not correct?
We're requesting in
In the budget, 8.8, about and a half more people to, well, what are they gonna do? Where are they gonna carry them dogs when they get them is what I want to know. What are they gonna be doing? You don't have any space.
The budget only calls for 3 additional field staff.
All right, and that's how many more than what you have now?
Total would be 6. There's
So, all right,
currently
well,
4.
what, that's 6. If they can't go out there, they got nowhere to put the animals when they bring them in.
Well, unfortunately, as Scott
gonna do?
alluded to, we anticipate adoptions going down significantly, and we also anticipate.
first year.
In the first year, just in this first year, we also anticipate euthanasia rates increasing.
Well, I want to say it, and you people are doing a wonderful job trying to get dogs adopted, but you know, I got myself into trouble talking about dogs before. Don't intend to do that again. But I'm telling you, it's hard to do, and I know it is, because I adopted one from Edgecombe County. But anyway, that's beside the point. But it is. I don't know what these people are going to be doing if you don't have the space to take and to put the dogs. And what I'm very much interested in, how long do you keep those dogs in those pens that you've got? And I know you don't want to put them to sleep. I'm not even going to say kill, just put them to sleep. And for that. But we got a lot of problems before we go to spending. I think we got solved to me. I really do.
Mr. Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I came front and center with dog situation in the family this year, and Miss Whaley was unique and very, very professional in her dealing with my grandbaby and me. Now, when it comes down to the rabbit dogs and the squirrels, the deer and the coon, don't bother them, 'cause I love that type of eating. And I had some friends of mine that used to always would let me know when I could stop by and get that rabbit or that piece of deer or that coon or that squirrel that they had. But my grandbaby, when school was out, used to come every Friday over to the shelter to visit me, and she made that Grandpa Day. And she would come in and jump on me during the lunch hour, and the therapy dog would come around 1 o'clock. Now I got 4 categories here. I got hunting dog, pet dogs, therapy dogs, and nuisance dogs. Now, all of them was gonna be in that bunch that we've been talking about. And so, being in the center, I didn't have any spare money, but I had a little piece that people had been giving that I had been saving. And she happened to be in the room, sitting up on my lap, watching the TV, when one of the deacons that I used to serve down in Elizabeth City came in and reached in his pocket and gave my granddaughter a $100 bill and told her, "Give that to your grandpa." And she gave and she gave it to me. She said, "Nah, Grandpa, you can get my puppy." And I want you to know I left and went to the animal shelter. I had called Michelle earlier that morning, and she had found this pretty little brown fuzzy puppy that my grandbaby saw, and the staff had worked with it 4 or 5 hours and had her in such condition that my grandbaby could go there and play with her, even pick her up and tote her. And I knew I was in big trouble, big trouble then. So Michelle called me back later on that evening and asked me, "Mr. Hammond, are you still interested in the puppy?" Only to find out from her mother that the apartment complex could not have dogs. And so then one of my grandchildren said, "Well, Grandpa, we can have them over here." I said, "We'll keep her." I said, "No, you can't keep her dog. You have to, y'all stay too far from it for that." But as thing was, I went to the shelter with my granddaughter that evening. And in less time than 40 minutes, my grandbaby had picked this puppy up and was rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And when her mother broke the news to her that she couldn't have it, that then, oh Lord, I was sure enough in big trouble then. To see the baby crying and me crying and her mama crying all at the same time really made $100 obsolete. And so when I was asked this question by Virginia's staff, I said I didn't want us to do nothing during this budget cycle that will get people hopes up that the problem is going to be solved when this cycle is over. And I forgot, Scott, when is the next year that we reval?
2016, January 1, be effective January 1, 2016. So actually, next year, we're actively involved, and next year will be more so. 2015 will be the work year, per se.
2015 will be the approaching year, right?
Well, yeah, the year in which all the work is done, effective January 1, 2016.
Well, like Mr. James was saying, he told me since I've been sitting here, we're only talking about dogs. I understand that, but when we come here 6 o'clock in the evening and at midnight, we're still talking about dogs. Dogs is a Pitt County #1 issue now. And I want everybody to know that our chief issues might be education and public safety, but we got to expand that to include animals. And as you said, Mr. James, about the unincorporated areas, yes, there are many of them in Pitt County, but yet and still, we just can't. What you eat won't satisfy my appetite, and won't fill me up. I'm gonna tell you like the old folks used to say. And Mr. Chairman, you asked about nuisance dogs. Now, I think we know how to deal with them. At least I do. Anything that's a nuisance, I think you ought to know how to deal with it. I learned in school too, Janice, that my rights ends where yours begin. I learned that in high school and I ain't forgot it. But I want to tell y'all something else, that when y'all saw this auditorium overrun and nobody had to ask to speak, Mr. Chairman, all of you that were here, you saw people from all sections of this auditorium come up and give their name and all. And one thing, Mr. James, you kept saying and quoting it, have them in the paper and all about the badge. Michelle, will you come around this morning? Will you just step around a little bit? I want you to know that our director our animal control shelter director has her badge and identification with her this morning. She may not have her piece, but she has it. You got a piece, don't you?
I have a personal,
You have a pistol.
not county,
You got a personal, yeah.
that I can't carry.
You about to
while I'm
finish,
working.
Mr. Hammond? Are you about to finish?
No, I ain't gonna be cut off till I do finish, Mr. Chairman.
Well, how about go ahead and finish then?
All right then, I was trying to answer her question. As I said before, therapy dogs come every Friday to visit the center. And two great big ones, taller than this desk here, in about 10 minutes' time, she was afraid of him when she first saw him. And in about 10 minutes that time, you saw her size that day, she was able to go and now that therapy, the owners, when they come down the hall and the room behind him, they want to know where's the baby. So I want you to know that I said then and I say now, somebody gonna say we're gonna have to build facilities called Windsor subdivision, Scott, and them other areas out there is not gonna want to put up expanding anything or doing anything else out there. But we're blessed county, Mr. James, to have some property on the north side in your district that over across the Tar River. We're blessed to have that. And I said it once and I'll say it again. I'll vote yay right today to have a decent facility for the shelter. And I want to applaud you, Mr. Manager, for putting this on your list of priorities for January 1 of 2015 to look at. I am re-elected now, and my tenure would not be up at January 1 if the Lord allows me to keep breathing. So I hope and pray that Pitt County can have an animal facility and an animal control staff that is second to none in eastern North Carolina, where we pride on ourselves as being the best in the East. And when we continue to compare ourselves with New Hanover County, that's Wilmington, don't forget all of those sources that they have with the beaches and tourism and everything else down there that they can garner some funds for such as you've given the space for. But Mr. Garris, Mr. Jimmy Garris, Tom Colson almost made me have a hiss until he explained to me. He said the paper said that he was resigning from the Board of Commissioners, but I hadn't read the whole story. And when I came in here Monday for our regular meeting, he took the time to explain to me exactly where his resignation was coming from, because I knew he's been very, very active in explaining his position and as a member of the Animal Control Board. But don't you think people don't love their pets? And I paid the price for shooting one, and I won't shoot another one. Not unless he's a threat to me, or a threat to my family. And when it comes down to Melvin having these grants, when I first come on the board, grants was being written, but the match was what was killing the grant before we could even study, discuss, or vote. Just what the county had to pay in order to obtain the grant. The match. What's the match? Was what the first question that I used to hear come out, well, what is the match? How much is it? And that's why you see on our agenda, no matching funds, a lot of time when there are funds being transferred to other areas, or what is, our clerk puts up there in big letters and in parentheses, no matching fund. That's letting you know that there's no ad valorem taxes or no other monies that the county have available being added or put to that situation. So, Mr. James, I appreciate all of your assistance, and you're gonna be missed here on the board to meeting, but you won't be missed because I know you'll be available to give your input when it's needed. Thank you, Michelle. You changed a lot about me and dogs from that day to this, and about our animal shelter from then to there.
Thank you.
Y'all do a great job with what you have to do it with. And I want to tell you again to your face.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're certainly welcome, Reverend. Mr. Colson.
Commissioner James brought up an interesting subject. Initially, I was very much in favor of passing the canine control ordinance beforehand, and then maybe some wiser advice was, well, let's put it off till after we talk about funding it. Because if we passed it and then we didn't support it with dollars, then that would have left Michelle in a bigger mess. So I backed off of that. So my question is, when is the proper time for us to put before this board, whether it be now? Do we wait till the public forum is over? After we have the public forum, do we have it that night? Or do we have it the meeting afterwards? My question is, when is the proper time to put the actual canine control ordinance before us to vote on it? Because if it's proper, I'll make a motion now that we pass it. We've seen it, we've studied it, it's been presented to us from the Animal Control Advisory perspective, and so it may be somewhat unorthodox to do it now. So I'll kind of bow to your leadership, Commissioner Owens, as to what we got to do there.
I think the manager wants to speak to that.
Okay.
I would recommend to the board, Commissioner Colson, that to follow your practice in terms of adopting ordinances, to conduct a public hearing, to provide public input on it, and then to adopt it thereafter. But I think, to be fair to the public, if you want that to happen, I'm not sure in terms of the May 19th meeting or the June 2nd, from a time frame of advertising.
You would need 10 days' notice prior to advertising a public hearing.
10 days.
And you would have a hearing, and then thereafter you would be able to
Probably
adopt.
looking at June 2nd, if that's the
All
board's
right,
wish.
so then can we kind of make that our plan? Is there?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
All right, that it, Tom?
that's it, thanks.
Mr. Webb and then Mr. Gash.
I just have one quick question. When you see the increases from the general fund subsidy over the next 3 years, where's that money going to come from? I know that the first part, and I may have missed it, I know the first part that would be the fund balance appropriation, and then the reduction in the 1%.
Yeah, the first 14-15 would be the one-time fund balance utilization. 15-16 would be the impact of reducing the discount rate from 2% to 1%.
Okay. And that'll bring in the 759?
No, that would be above and beyond what you're currently utilizing. You're currently subsidizing at the 339,
Gotcha.
so the difference would be.
Okay, I knew I crossed
Yes, sir.
wires in there somewhere. And my only reservation is I'm a little funny about going into a fund balance we just rebuilt. And then it's a small amount in the grand scheme of it, but, you know, it was also touched on with the community college yesterday too, and I don't want to get back to where we are and then start getting into the cookie jar, 'cause governments aren't good at staying out of it once they get into it. That's all there. Thank you.
Mr. Gash.
I had one question, and Scott, you may just want to bring this back to us at our next session, because I think we've kind of prolonged this discussion long enough. But I am interested in understanding a little more detail about the supervisor we're adding here. I understand the shelter attendants, the animal control officer, and office support. But why would we need to then have to add a supervisor when we have an outstanding supervisor out there?
Can we let Michelle?
That's not going to be an immediate position. Looking in the future, that would be when we're having 2 different facilities and 8 shelter attendants having to supervise the shelter aspects of 2 buildings. I
So-
try to be all things to everything, but I don't know if I get to the point, I have 2 separate buildings and staffing and then field staff that I can adequately ensure that all those employees are doing the right thing.
So does that mean then that we really don't need to have that person in this coming year's budget cycle?
That's where we put all the positions we thought it would take in this year's budget cycle. Again, I think the manager alluded that we would look at hiring the admin people first to work on the licensing and registration process. Then we would get the equipment and the interviewing going for the 3 field positions. Those are the most immediate positions
right.
besides the shelter
And I understand
attendants.
that.
And then, you know, there is a possibility that we would have some gap and as he said, some funds that could be reallocated to other departments because those positions wouldn't come until we have the facility.
My
Bill.
point is, and I'm sure everybody understands this, we're getting very, very tight on the money. And if there is anything we can kind of adjust here, then of course we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe everyone's had an opportunity to talk. You want to say anything else, Mr. Hammond?
Yes, sir.
I thought so.
I don't like reading that we made appropriations to the fund balance and then we can't vote or include that in the vote of what our needs are.
All right, thanks, sir. Mr. Manager, you've heard remarks from the board. You know what you want to work with. I'd caution the board to this extent. Let's do not pass the budget today because if we are going to do that, it'll be moot to have those other agencies coming in.
Understand
I
that
like
too,
the
Mr.
idea of
Chairman.
keeping everything open until you can hear from everybody. With that having been said, we know we have a meeting scheduled for Monday morning, May the 12th at 8:30 right here. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask one question? What Mr. Garris mentioned,
Recess.
I hope that you all will look at that.
Absolutely, yes.
Please,
We
I
heard that loud
just,
and- loud
that's
and
all I
clear.
wanted to make sure that we weren't just making the statement.
No, we got
We
it.
would like for you to look at that at a possible reduction.
I'd like you
Thank
to look at all of it. Believe
Mr. Chairman,
me.
if we can recess rather than adjourn?
Well, it's whatever the board wants. If you're gonna go back and redo everything else,
I
when
move
you
that we
open again.
recess.
I second the motion.
All right, let's vote. Thank you.
All right.